Have you ever stayed in a place where every door hides a secret, where you wonder if someone or something is trying to reach you from behind those walls? The Grand Lake Hotel didn't make headlines, but it had its own way of swallowing stories whole, turning real people into rumors, and hiding more pain than anyone would ever admit. Most nights, Ben McCarthy didn't think about those things. He'd already lived one life as a cop in Milwaukee, and now, after too many mistakes, too many regrets, he was the night manager of a crumbling luxury hotel that was past its prime, clinging to its faded grandeur like a wounded animal. It was close to midnight when Ben clipped the leash on Atlas, the retired K9 German Shepherd with a silver snout and haunted eyes. They made their rounds together, boots echoing down empty corridors, flashlight beam bouncing off polished wood and mirrors that reflected more ghosts than guests. Atlas padded ahead, ears pricked, muscles taut beneath his worn brown coat. In the silence of the lobby, the world felt frozen. That was always the witching hour, when the hotel's secrets started breathing louder. Tonight felt different. The air was charged, thick with a tension that set Ben's nerves on edge. The elevator chimed on the top floor. Ben could have sworn he heard something. A low, desperate sound, too human to be the pipes, too faint for a security camera. Atlas stiffened, hackles raised, and stared up the shadowy stairwell toward the penthouse suite. Ben's grip tightened on the leash. "What is it, boy?" No answer but the sharp intake of Atlas's breath. At the penthouse door, Atlas braced his paws and let out a short, guttural bark. Ben pressed his ear to the heavy wood and caught the faintest murmur, like someone calling for help and then swallowing the words in fear. His heart hammered. He fumbled with his master key, then stopped. Protocol said to call security first. He radioed for backup, voice steady, but the security team on shift, 2 college kids and an older guard who'd worked here longer than anyone, shrugged it off. "It's just the old plumbing, Ben. This place rattles and moans every night." Ben nearly let it go. That's what he would have done a year ago. But Atlas wouldn't move. He pawed at the base of the door, claws scraping, tail low and stiff. In the pause, Ben noticed something else. The hall was colder, and the gold number on the penthouse door seemed scratched, like someone had tried to claw their way out. Ben's cop instincts kicked in. He reached for his phone, but then a voice whispered behind him. "Some things are better left alone, but not all things." Ben turned to see Paul, the maintenance man. Paul's limp was bad tonight, his face pinched with pain. He always worked the graveyard shift, invisible to guests, kind to stray animals and exhausted staff. There was something raw in Paul's eyes, a warning, but also a plea. "Listen, Ben. You didn't hear that from me, but if your dog says something's wrong, you should trust him. This place forgets people." Before Ben could answer, the penthouse light flickered beneath the door. Atlas pressed close, nose working the gap. Ben's mind spun. Should he break protocol, risk his job, trust a dog's instincts and a maintenance man's whisper over the official line? The corridor seemed to close in, shadows stretching longer, secrets pressing against the walls. He glanced back down the hallway, half expecting to see someone watching. A silhouette by the fire exit, the glint of a camera lens, a guest out of place. Nothing. Just the old patterned carpet, peeling wallpaper, and the smell of lemon polish over something sour and metallic. Ben knocked, hard, calling out, "This is hotel management. If anyone needs help, say something." Silence. Then, a barely audible scuffle. Atlas let out a soft whine. Ben's heart pounded. He slid his key into the lock, hesitating for a single breath. long enough to remember every time he'd ignored his gut as a cop, every routine call that turned into a nightmare. Then, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. It was Marcus, head of security, frowning. "You know the rules, McCarthy. No guest complaints, no entry. You open that door, it's your badge." Ben hesitated. Atlas growled, low and fierce. Paul hovered behind them, shoulders hunched, eyes darting. In that moment, Ben realized this wasn't just about a strange noise. It was about every choice he'd ever made, every moment he'd looked away, every person he hadn't helped when he had the chance. He turned to Marcus. "You ever wonder what we're protecting here, Marcus? The guests or the secrets?" Marcus shook his head, already walking away, but Paul stayed. "Just remember, Ben, sometimes it's safer to walk past a closed door, but sometimes that's how bad things get worse." Atlas nudged Ben's hand, eyes locked on the door. Ben drew a deep breath, feeling the weight of the hotel, the night, and all the old mistakes pressing down on him. The silence was suffocating. He made a choice. "Come on, Atlas, we're not done here." As they moved on, the shadows in the Grand Lake Hotel seemed to grow deeper. Ben didn't know it yet, but tonight would unravel everything: loyalties, secrets, even his own idea of what it meant to be brave. And in that darkness, one dog's faith would be the only light left. By morning, the chill of the night lingered, heavy in the halls of the Grand Lake Hotel. Ben tried to convince himself he'd imagined the muffled cries and the feeling of wrongness gnawing at him. But Atlas wouldn't let it go. The dog had barely slept, pacing the small manager's office, nose pressed to the gap under the door every time footsteps passed by. Ben sipped burnt coffee, eyes gritty, reviewing the guest logs, an old habit from his days on the force. The penthouse suite had been cleaned yesterday by Maria Torres. She was efficient, always early, always polite, a soft-voiced woman who sent half her wages home to her family. But her name hadn't been checked out by security since she'd clocked in yesterday afternoon. Ben frowned. The log ended abruptly, no signature, no recorded exit. He pulled up camera feeds, but the footage outside the penthouse was gone. "Corrupted file," the system read, grainy static where Maria should have been. His unease grew. Staff who used to greet him now whispered in clusters, eyes flicking away when he passed. At the break room, Ben asked around, "Anyone seen Maria since yesterday?" A few shook their heads. A young desk clerk, Anna, muttered, "Maybe she's just sick." But her voice was tight. Old Mr. Nguyen, the breakfast cook, glanced up with haunted eyes. "Don't ask, Ben. Some things are safer not to know." Atlas was anxious, nudging Ben toward the service elevator. The dog's nose worked the air, picking up traces of fear, sweat, bleach, and something sharp. Ben followed, letting Atlas lead. They wound through the back corridors, a warren of storage closets, laundry carts, old hotel junk, until Atlas stopped, ears pricked, at a battered door marked "Out of Order." Ben tried the handle, locked. From inside he heard a muffled whimper. The hair rose on the back of his neck. He rattled the handle harder. "It's Ben. Maria, are you in there?" Silence. Then a shaky, desperate sob. He forced the lock with his master key. The door swung open, and the stench hit him: fear, sweat, cheap cleaning fluid, something coppery. Maria was inside, huddled in the shadows between mops and chemical barrels. Her uniform was torn at the sleeve, blood dried in a line down her forearm. She shrank from the light, whispering in Spanish. Atlas whined and pressed close, tail wagging gently. Ben knelt. "It's okay. You're safe now." He draped his jacket over her shoulders and eased her out. Maria clung to him, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Don't let them see me," she whispered. "They'll come back. I saw too much." Her eyes darted toward the penthouse, wild with terror. Ben helped her into the break room, sitting her at a battered table in the corner. "Who did this, Maria?" She shuddered. I was cleaning upstairs. The door opened. Men in black suits. One had a badge, but it wasn't police. They grabbed a woman, dragged her into the suite. She tried to scream, but someone hit her. Then they saw me. Said if I told, I'd disappear too." Atlas sat beside her, pressing his head into her lap. Maria stroked his ears, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I hid in the supply closet. Someone locked the door from outside. I thought I'd die in there." Her voice broke. Ben's mind raced. This was bigger than a simple hotel disturbance. He'd heard rumors about Victor Dale, the man who rented the penthouse, a real estate developer with too many powerful friends. There'd always been whispers, bribes, threats, women who vanished. But this was different. Maria was a witness, and now she was in danger. He looked up as Paul entered, carrying a tray of food. Paul's limp was worse in the morning, his face drawn and tired. He took in the scene: Maria's torn sleeve, Atlas's anxious stare, Ben's tense jaw with a knowing nod. "You're playing with fire, Ben." He set the tray down gently, careful not to startle Maria. "But fire's better than letting the dark win." Ben lowered his voice. "Paul, I need your help. Maria saw something in the penthouse. She can't go to the police. If these men are who I think they are, the cops won't help." Paul nodded, sliding a mug of coffee toward Ben. "I've heard things, seen things. This hotel, people disappear all the time, but no one ever cared enough to ask." Maria's fear deepened. "They said they'd find me if I told anyone. They have cameras everywhere." Ben placed a hand on her arm. "We'll keep you safe, I promise. But you need to trust us. Did you see any names? Anything that could help?" Maria shook her head. "Just faces. The tall one with the scar. He's the one who locked me in. The badge he flashed was gold, with a snake. I remember that." Paul's eyes narrowed. "That's Dale's security team. They're ex-cops, ex-military, hired to make problems go away." Ben's hands clenched. "Not this time. We're not letting them scare us." He caught a movement at the doorway. Anna, the desk clerk, hovering. Her face was pale. "Ben, you need to be careful. People are watching. The cameras. They're not all for guests." She pressed a scrap of paper into his hand. "If you need to hide someone, use this code on the staff lockers. No one else knows it." Atlas nudged Ben's knee, as if urging him on. Ben nodded. "Thank you, Anna." He glanced at Maria. "We'll figure this out together." In that moment, Ben realized how quickly fear could spread through a place, infecting everyone, making them complicit by their silence. But as he watched Atlas curl protectively around Maria, he felt something else. A flicker of hope. Stubborn and fierce. They weren't alone anymore. And in a hotel built on secrets, maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. The back room they used to hide Maria was barely bigger than a janitor's closet. 2 battered chairs, a flickering bulb, and a table stacked with old paperwork. The window was sealed shut, the air thick with dust and the sour tang of cleaning chemicals. Atlas stood sentry at the door, a living wall between Maria and the world outside. Ben could feel his own nerves fraying, but he tried to project calm. He'd seen people unravel before. He'd been one of them. Ben knelt in front of Maria, keeping his voice low and steady. "You're safe now, Maria. No one gets to you here." He poured her a cup of tea, hands shaking only slightly. Maria hugged her knees to her chest, still wearing his old jacket, and stared at the floor as if words could hurt her. Every few minutes, she'd start at a sound from the hallway or glance fearfully at the doorknob. Atlas pressed against her side, resting his big head in her lap, and finally Maria managed to unclench her fists and stroke his fur. For a while no one spoke. The silence hung heavy, broken only by Atlas's deep, even breaths. Ben knew the look on Maria's face, the 1,000-yard stare. He'd seen it in old partners, in victims, and sometimes in the mirror after a bad shift. He didn't push her. He just waited, his own mind replaying the mistakes that had driven him out of the force. He'd always thought he could recognize real trouble, but too many times, he'd chosen to look away. It was safer, easier. Now he saw the same choice reflected in the faces of the hotel staff, and it made him feel sick. At last, Maria began to speak, her voice almost a whisper. When I was locked in that closet, I thought I'd die there. I thought about my children, my mother. No one would have known. No one would have looked. She swallowed hard. I saw them drag her, one of the guests, into the penthouse. The woman fought. She screamed, but someone covered her mouth. The men, they wore suits, but their eyes, they didn't care if anyone saw. I was so scared. When they saw me, I tried to run. I slipped. They said if I told anyone, I'd be next. Ben's jaw clenched. Did you see their faces? Maria nodded. One had a scar here. She touched her cheek. The other wore a ring, big, gold, with a snake on it. Ben cursed under his breath. That matched what Paul had said about Victor Dale's private security. What about the guest, the woman? Maria shook her head. I never saw her face. She was struggling. Then the door slammed. Paul arrived a few minutes later, arms full of blankets and food. He moved quietly, like he belonged in the shadows. He handed Maria a sandwich, pressing her trembling hands with his own weathered ones. Eat. You'll need your strength. Maria tried to smile. Paul looked at Ben, then Atlas. You're playing with fire, he murmured. But I'll help. Someone needs to. Atlas remained alert, never letting his gaze leave the door. Every so often he would glance at Ben, as if checking for reassurance or waiting for an order. Ben reached out, ruffling the fur behind the dog's ears. You're the bravest one here, aren't you, buddy? The morning dragged on. Maria ate in silence. Ben paced, mind racing with plans and worst-case scenarios. He thought of the times he'd missed the warning signs. A young woman in a shelter who vanished after her abuser made bail. A homeless man who begged for help and then turned up dead a week later. Every mistake haunted him. Every silence felt like another link in a chain that kept the truth buried. Paul returned with a change of clothes for Maria. You can't stay here long, he warned. Victor's men will notice she's missing. They have people everywhere. Ben nodded. Just a little longer. We need to figure out what she knows, how to get her out safely. Paul crouched down, meeting Maria's eyes. Sometimes the truth leaks out. If someone cares enough to listen, I'll help you. I know what it's like to be scared. Maria blinked at him, tears welling. Why are you doing this? Paul hesitated, then shrugged. Because I remember when no one helped me, and because I hate bullies. The hotel felt smaller by the hour. Ben used his old police instincts, scanning cameras in hallways, memorizing staff routines, listening for gossip. Every passing shadow felt dangerous. Anna, the desk clerk, slipped him updates about Victor's movements and which security guards could be trusted. Atlas trailed Ben through every corridor, never leaving his side, even when Ben's own anxiety crept close to panic. That afternoon, Ben let himself remember his own failures. He'd walked away from the badge because he couldn't stomach being another cog in a corrupt machine. But what good was quitting if he was just going to look away now? He stared at Atlas, lying beside Maria, and saw loyalty in its purest form. The dog hadn't hesitated, hadn't flinched. He just protected the vulnerable, because it was the right thing to do. Maria dozed on a pile of blankets. Paul slipped out to bring her more food, always careful, always watchful. Ben sat at the table, rubbing tired eyes, thinking about how easy it was to let fear keep you silent. But tonight, he promised himself, silence wouldn't win, not this time, not in this hotel, not with these people counting on him. As the sun set, shadows stretched across the carpet. The Grand Lake Hotel, for all its secrets, had never seen a night quite like this one, and neither had Ben McCarthy. The choices he made now would haunt him or save them all. Atlas lifted his head, alert. Ben stood, taking a deep breath, ready for whatever came next. Night fell with a slow, anxious heaviness inside the Grand Lake Hotel. In the cramped staff room, Maria huddled in Ben's jacket, eyes darting to every small sound in the hallway. Atlas had become her shadow, never more than a few feet away, his warm bulk a comfort against the bite of fear. Ben, exhausted but focused, leaned against the wall, watching her closely. He understood that trauma like hers had layers. She wasn't just scared of what she'd seen, but of what might happen next. Finally, as the hour grew late and the quiet deepened, Maria found her voice. "I came here for a better life," she whispered. "Back home I had nothing. I just wanted to work, to help my family. When you're an immigrant, people think you're invisible. Maybe that's why those men didn't care if I saw them." Her words struck Ben. He'd heard confessions like this before. Pain, hope, disappointment woven together. He sat down beside her, dropping his voice so it was almost a hush. "I get it. You feel like nobody cares. But I do. Atlas does. Paul does too, even if he acts gruff." He let that sit for a moment. The room filled with Atlas's soft breathing and the distant hum of vending machines. "You know, I left the force because I was tired of pretending not to see things. Too many good people got hurt because no one wanted to make waves." Maria looked up at him, her guard dropping for the first time. "Why did you really help me?" Ben shrugged. "Because I was you once, in a different way. I let things slide. I looked the other way. I can't do it anymore." Atlas seemed to sense the change in mood and pressed his head gently into Maria's lap. She smiled through tears. "He trusts you," she said. "That's enough for me." Just then, Paul appeared in the doorway, limping heavier than usual, eyes sharp and wary. He handed Ben a thermos and sat heavily, letting out a sigh that sounded like gravel. "You two swapping sad stories?" His voice was gruff, but his eyes softened on Maria. "You picked a hell of a night to stick your neck out, Ben." Ben nodded, glancing at the clock. "Any word?" Paul shook his head. "Victor's guys are getting antsy. They know something's up. You three aren't exactly invisible, you know. I had to make up a story about you covering a double shift just to keep Maria's name out of tonight's logs." He looked at Maria. "They'll be looking for you. And if they find you with Ben, let's just say it won't be pretty for any of us." A heavy silence fell. Maria wrung her hands, trembling. "If I go to the police, they'll just send me away. Maybe worse." Paul snorted. "That's about the size of it. Some of these guys used to be cops. They know how to make things disappear." He looked at Ben. "But you knew that already, didn't you?" Ben nodded. "That's why we need proof. We need something the cops or the press can't ignore. He turned to Maria. Would you help us? Maybe just tell your story to someone who'll listen? Maria hesitated, the memory of the penthouse still raw. I'm scared. If they find out... Her voice broke, but Ben reached across the table and took her hand. We'll keep you safe, I promise. But I can't do this alone. Atlas nudged her with his nose as if urging her forward. Paul gave a half smile. You know, this mutt might be the bravest soul in the room. He's not scared of anybody. Maria let out a shaky laugh, wiping her eyes. Okay, I'll help, but only if Atlas stays with me. Ben grinned. Deal. He wouldn't have it any other way. For the next hour, they planned. Paul scouted the hallways and mapped out the quietest times to move. Anna, the desk clerk, texted updates when Victor's men left their post, which cameras to avoid, which staff could be trusted to look the other way. Maria told her story, voice trembling but growing stronger, while Ben scribbled notes and recorded details. Suddenly, footsteps thudded down the hall. Paul peeked through the crack in the door, then eased it shut with a curse. They're searching for you, Ben. Victor's head of security is going room to room. If he finds you with Maria, there'll be hell to pay. Ben's mind raced. He looked at Maria. We have to move, now. Can you walk? Maria nodded, shakily rising to her feet. Atlas stayed close, watching the door. Paul whispered, Take the service stairs. I'll distract them. Meet me by the laundry chute in 10 minutes. If I'm not there, keep going. Ben squeezed Paul's shoulder. Thank you. Paul just grunted, already disappearing into the shadows. They crept out, Atlas leading the way, Maria in the middle, Ben taking up the rear. Every step down the dim stairwell was agony. Any moment, a guard could round the corner and end it all. But luck was with them. Paul's booming voice echoed through the halls, drawing the guards away. They made it to the laundry room, hearts pounding. Paul joined them, out of breath and grinning. Not bad for a busted knee. He handed Ben a key. There's a storage room on the second floor, no cameras. Stay put until I signal. Maria squeezed Paul's hand. Thank you. He shrugged. Some debts you pay forward. As the night wore on, fear didn't leave, but something else settled in. Solidarity, stubbornness, the beginnings of trust. For the first time, Maria seemed to believe she might survive. Ben felt the old cop's instinct flicker back to life. Not just the urge to protect, but the hope that doing the right thing could still matter. And Atlas, always Atlas, kept watch, a silent, steadfast guardian in a hotel full of shadows. By the time the charity gala began on the main floor of the Grand Lake Hotel, the building thrummed with an anxious energy that seeped even into its quietest corners. Guests in evening wear swept through the marble lobby beneath chandeliers that glimmered like they belonged to another, happier era. But on the upper floors, far from the music and laughter, 4 people and a dog were preparing to risk everything. Ben kept checking the clock as he walked Maria, Paul, and Atlas through their plan one more time. We get in, get the proof, and get out, quiet and fast. Victor's security will be stretched thin with the gala, but that only buys us a small window. Maria, still pale but determined, nodded. She wore a borrowed maid's uniform, blending in with the other housekeepers. Paul, who knew the building's guts better than anyone, clutched his battered ring of keys. Atlas sat at Ben's feet, eyes sharp and alert, already sensing the tension. They moved like shadows up the back stairs, sticking to the edges of the old carpet runner. Paul led the way, peeking around corners, tapping on pipes to signal when the path was clear. As they neared the penthouse, Ben's heart hammered against his ribs. The last time he'd stood outside this door, Atlas had pulled him back from a terrible mistake. Now, he trusted his gut and the dog beside him. Inside, the penthouse was silent. Ben slid the master key into the lock, heart in his throat. Maria scanned the hallway. No one. He pushed the door open, and they slipped inside. The suite smelled of expensive cologne and burnt coffee. Marble floors gleamed under their feet, and beyond the window, the city lights twinkled in the night. They moved quickly. Maria, hands shaking, led them to the far end of the suite where she'd seen the men take the woman. "It was here," she whispered, pointing to a painting crooked on the wall. Ben moved it aside and found a slim panel. Paul popped it open with a screwdriver, revealing a hidden compartment lined with felt. Inside sat a black smartphone. Atlas's nose twitched as Ben reached for the phone. "This has to be it." He thumbed it on, no password. The screen flickered to life, displaying a folder of videos, photos, and voice memos labeled only by date and initials. Ben's stomach turned as he scrolled. Images of frightened women, videos of threats, even a few of hotel staff accepting envelopes, evidence of blackmail, violence, and silence. Victor Dale's entire operation in a palm-sized device. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled. Atlas's ears shot up. Maria gasped, freezing. Paul whispered, "Quick, the service hall!" Ben pocketed the phone and they darted through a side door into the narrow corridor behind the penthouse kitchen. But a security guard, built like a linebacker, blocked their way. "What are you doing up here?" His hand went to his radio. Paul stepped forward, cool as ever. "Maintenance. Pipe burst in 17B. You want to explain to the guests why their water's brown?" The guard frowned, uncertain. Atlas growled, low and menacing. Ben tried to slip past, but the guard shoved Paul aside and lunged. Maria screamed. The phone slipped from Ben's hand, skidding across the tile. Atlas launched forward, barking so loud the walls shook. The guard, startled, kicked at the dog, catching Atlas in the side. The big shepherd yelped, but lunged again, teeth bared, forcing the man to backpedal into a wall of cleaning supplies. In the chaos, a bottle shattered. Atlas got nicked by flying glass but didn't let up. Ben grabbed Maria's arm, pulling her toward the exit as Paul scooped up the phone. "Go, go!" Paul shouted, taking a hard shove to the chest from the guard. He crashed into a utility cart, wincing as he hit the ground, but he tossed the phone to Ben. "Get it out of here!" Maria and Ben bolted down the stairwell, Atlas limping but staying close. Paul hauled himself upright, blocking the guard's path just long enough for the others to escape. The guard cursed, fumbling for his radio. "Someone's in the penthouse. Lock it down." Ben and Maria burst onto the service floor, hearts racing. Atlas whined in pain, blood staining his fur from the cut, but he stayed alert, nudging Ben forward. Downstairs, the party music masked the commotion above. Ben ducked into the housekeeping office, hands shaking as he wiped the blood from Atlas's side. "You're okay, buddy. You're okay." Maria pressed a towel to the wound. "He saved us," she whispered. Ben nodded, voice thick. He always does. Paul limped in minutes later, panting. "They know we were there. It's only a matter of time before they check the security feeds." Ben showed him the phone. "We got it. It's all here. Enough to bring Victor down." Paul sagged against the door, a grin cracking his tired face. "Told you, the truth always leaks, if someone cares enough to get their hands dirty." But reality crashed back in. Maria's eyes widened with fear. What if they have police? What if Victor's friends make this disappear? Ben's jaw clenched. Then we go above their heads. We go to the press. Just then, Anna texted Ben, "Security looking for you. Get out. They're locking down all exits." Ben met Paul's eyes. We need a new plan, fast. Atlas, still bleeding but steady, wagged his tail as if to say he was ready for whatever came next. For the first time, Ben let himself believe they might really pull this off. Not because they were strong or lucky, but because they refused to give up. In the end, maybe that's what courage really was. As the hotel descended into chaos, one thing was clear. They had the evidence that could topple a kingpin. But escaping with it would take every scrap of grit, loyalty, and nerve they had left. Chaos was brewing in every corner of the Grand Lake Hotel. The elevators were locked down, security radios crackled in every hallway, and the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the service corridors. A heavy sense of dread pressed in as Ben, Maria, Atlas, and Paul regrouped in the dimly lit storage room on the second floor, clutching their only hope, the phone full of evidence. Atlas, wounded but still alert, paced near the door, his tail stiff and his ears flicking at every distant sound. Paul braced himself against a mop sink, sweat beading on his brow. Victor's shutting the whole place down. No one in, no one out. He's got friends on the police force, so don't expect the cavalry. Maria's hands trembled as she wrapped a makeshift bandage tighter around Atlas's side, tears shining in her eyes. He's bleeding. What if they come for us? Ben forced himself to sound confident. We're not giving up. We get the evidence out. We save ourselves, and everyone else these men have hurt. Maria's phone buzzed, a warning from Anna, the desk clerk. Security is coming your way. Hide, Ben swore under his breath. We have to move. Paul, any ideas? Paul's eyes narrowed, calculating. Boiler room. Most guards hate it down there. Hot, loud, dark. Cameras barely work. Ben nodded. Let's go, quiet. Moving in silence, they navigated the back hallways, sticking to shadows and ducking into empty linen closets when patrols drew near. Atlas limped, but kept his head high, refusing to fall behind. Ben squeezed his shoulder every few feet, whispering praise. Almost there, buddy. You're a hero tonight. As they neared the boiler room, the temperature climbed. Pipes hissed and banged above their heads. The air shimmered with heat. Paul eased open the heavy metal door and waved them inside. The rumble of the boilers masked their whispers. Maria collapsed on an upturned milk crate, cradling Atlas's head in her lap, murmuring prayers in Spanish. Paul slumped against the wall, pressing a rag to a scrape on his elbow. Ben's mind raced, how to get the evidence out. The Wi-Fi was spotty at best in the boiler room, and cellular reception was a dead zone. He scrolled through the phone, hunting for a signal. Nothing. We have to get this to a reporter or someone in the press, someone who can make it public before Victor can bury it. Paul nodded grimly. But if we step out there, we're sitting ducks. The pressure grew as a loudspeaker crackled overhead. Attention staff and guests. Due to a security incident, please remain in your rooms. Security will conduct ID checks on all floors. Maria's face blanched. They're looking for us. What if they find us down here? Ben squeezed her hand. They won't, but we have to buy ourselves time. Suddenly, footsteps thundered on the metal stairs outside. Atlas growled low in his throat. Hackles up, the doorknob jiggled. Ben motioned everyone to silence, pulling a wrench from a toolbox and holding it tight. Paul readied a fire extinguisher, jaw set. Maria held Atlas close, whispering for him to be brave. The door swung open a crack, just enough for a flashlight beam to slice through the shadows. But it was Anna. Her face was white with fear, her breath coming in gasps. They're searching every floor. Victor's men are watching the exits. If you try to leave, you won't make it. But the fire alarm, if it goes off, security has to evacuate everyone. It's the law. She pressed a torn, grease-stained map into Ben's hands, pointing to a small box near the service stairs. "The alarm panel. Trip it, and you get your window." Ben hugged her. "You didn't have to risk this." Anna shrugged, tears in her eyes. "Some of us are tired of being scared." As Anna slipped out, Paul nodded at Ben. "She's right. The alarm's our best shot. But we'll have to be fast. The minute that bell rings, every guard in this place will be scrambling." Ben weighed the risk. "If it's the only way, we do it." Maria looked up, resolve in her eyes. "I'll do it. They won't expect me to move. You get ready with the phone. Send everything as soon as you hear the alarm." Ben hesitated, seeing the terror flicker behind her bravery. "Maria, you don't have to—" She cut him off, shaking her head. "I'm tired of hiding. I want to be free." Paul grinned. "Tougher than half the guys I ever met." The next moments were a blur. Maria slipped out, head down, blending in with the crowd of staff sent to check boiler gauges. Ben powered up the phone, readying a mass email to every news outlet and reporter he could think of. Paul kept watch at the door. Atlas pressed close to Ben's side, eyes never leaving the hallway. Minutes stretched. Every heartbeat thudded loud in Ben's ears. Then, from somewhere above, a shrill alarm shattered the silence. Red lights spun in the hallways. Shouts erupted as guests spilled from their rooms and security scrambled to manage the chaos. The hotel transformed into a hive of movement and confusion. Ben seized the moment, sending the files, photos, videos, voice memos to every address on his list. The phone buzzed as emails left the outbox, one after another. "Go, go, go," Paul urged. They bolted for the service stairs, Atlas at their heels. On the main floor, staff and guests clogged the exits. Ben glanced back. Guards spotted them, yelling, pushing through the crowd. Paul shoved open a fire door, waving Ben and Atlas through. Maria met them outside, breathless but grinning. "Did it work?" Ben held up the phone, triumphant. "It's gone. They can't stop it now." But as they slipped into the night, the hotel blazing with alarms behind them, Ben knew it wasn't over. Victor would not let this go quietly. But they had done it. They had broken the silence, forced the world to see the truth. Atlas limped at Ben's side, tired but unbowed, a hero to the end. In that moment, Ben realized the power of loyalty, courage, and the small, stubborn hope that change was still possible, even when the world tried to keep the truth locked behind closed doors. The fire alarm still echoed in Ben's ears as they huddled in the alley behind the hotel, hearts pounding, lungs heaving in the damp midnight air. The city outside seemed unchanged, just the soft glow of streetlights and the distant hum of traffic. But inside the Grand Lake Hotel, a reckoning had begun. Ben wiped the sweat from his brow, feeling the sting of Atlas's blood on his hands, the weight of the phone in his pocket. Maria clung to Paul, silent tears cutting streaks through the dirt on her cheeks. Suddenly, Ben's phone vibrated. One message, then two, then a flood. News outlets, reporters, anonymous email addresses. The files had landed. Within minutes, the evidence began to ripple outward. Links, downloads, requests for comment. The dam had broken, and the flood was coming for Victor Dale and everyone who'd protected him. A siren wailed in the distance. Not hotel security, but the police. And this time, city cops. Not Victor's hired muscle. Ben looked at Maria. "You ready?" She nodded, wiping her face, shoulders squaring. "Let's finish this." Paul grunted, helping her to her feet. Atlas nudged Ben's leg, eyes bright despite the pain in his side. "We did the right thing," Ben murmured, giving the old dog a grateful scratch. "Now we see if the world cares." Within half an hour, the scene outside the hotel had transformed. News vans crowded the curb, floodlights splashing blue and white across the old brick facade. A swarm of reporters blocked the front steps. Uniformed police cordoned off the entrance while detectives began taking statements. Guests, staff, and partygoers streamed outside, confusion and shock painted across their faces. The air was thick with the electric buzz of questions finally being asked. Ben, Maria, and Paul watched from the shadows until a young reporter, eager and sharp-eyed, caught their attention. "You're Ben McCarthy, right? Night manager?" He nodded. "And you sent us those files?" Again he nodded, voice hoarse. "We have a witness, Maria. She saw it all, but she needs protection." It all happened fast. Flashbulbs, microphones, police officers hustling them into the lobby. Maria shivered under the glare but spoke her truth, voice trembling but clear, as Ben and Paul stood close by. She told what she'd seen. The woman dragged into the penthouse, the threats, the fear. The evidence on the phone backed her up. Dates, faces, transactions. Every ugly secret Victor Dale and his men had tried to bury. Atlas, bandaged now by a kindly paramedic, sat at Maria's feet as she answered questions. He licked her hand whenever she faltered, steady as a rock. The press ate it up. "Hero dog saves witness." But Ben could see it wasn't just about headlines. For the first time, people were actually listening to the people they'd ignored for years. Outside, police escorted Victor Dale out of the service entrance, hands cuffed, face red with fury and disbelief. His men followed, heads down, their power broken. In the underground garage, as Victor tried to make a last desperate escape, Atlas and Ben intercepted him. The big shepherd braced, teeth bared, blocking the only exit. Victor tried to bluff his way through, but the police were already there, guns drawn. "You picked the wrong hotel, Victor," Ben said quietly, watching the man's empire crumble. The next morning, the hotel buzzed with a different energy. News trucks lined the street. Guests stopped Ben in the hallway, shaking his hand, thanking him. Paul, now limping even more, was a local legend, the maintenance man who helped crack a crime ring. Maria, wrapped in a thick blanket, was given temporary protection and a lawyer by a nonprofit. Her eyes shone with the first real hope Ben had seen in her since the nightmare began. Atlas became the hotel's unofficial mascot overnight. Reporters snapped photos as he limped through the lobby, head high, tail wagging. Children hugged him. Staff brought him treats. One little girl, newly arrived from out of state, whispered, "He's like a superhero, but better." Ben ruffled her hair, eyes stinging. "Yeah, he is." In the days that followed, the fallout spread fast. City officials launched investigations into hotel management, security companies, and police officers on Victor's payroll. The Grand Lake Hotel shut its doors for a full review. Staff and guests relocated. Paul was quietly let go, but word spread. Ben's old friend at a security firm had a job waiting. Maria accepted a volunteer role with a group that helped immigrant workers find safety and legal help. She was nervous, but every day she grew a little braver, sharing her story, helping others hide when they needed it most. The press tried to turn Ben into a hero, but he kept the focus on Maria and Paul, and most of all, on Atlas. "We did what anyone should do," he told the cameras. "We listened to someone nobody wanted to hear. We trusted a dog who wouldn't stop barking. That's all." Maria, finally breathing easy, asked Ben one night, "Do you think things will really change?" Ben thought of all the nights he'd walked those halls alone, ignoring the little alarms in his gut, letting silence do the damage. He smiled, tired but hopeful. "Maybe not everywhere, not all at once. But here, for you? Yeah, I really do." And as the sun set over the now empty hotel, Ben stood outside with Atlas, watching the city come alive with the stories they'd set free. He knew there were more battles ahead. Pain, loss, more secrets waiting behind other doors. But for tonight at least, the truth was out. And sometimes, that was enough. The days after Victor Dale's arrest blurred together for Ben, Maria, Paul, and Atlas, each of them changed by what they'd risked and what they'd lost. The Grand Lake Hotel, once so full of hidden drama, now sat silent and closed, its gold-lettered sign taped over, the lobby echoing with emptiness instead of laughter and music. Official notices papered the front doors, closed for investigation. The city buzzed with news updates and speculation, but inside those locked doors, life had ground to a halt. Ben found himself suspended, his badge and keys collected by a tight-lipped investigator who barely met his eyes. "Just a formality, McCarthy, until we finish our review." But the tone said otherwise. The hotel owners wanted to protect their name, and not everyone saw Ben as a hero. To them, he was the night manager who broke protocol, who caused trouble, who dragged their secrets into the sunlight. The silence from the people upstairs hurt in a way Ben hadn't expected. He wondered if he'd ever walk those halls again, if the place he'd come to think of as home was lost for good. Paul was quietly let go 2 days later. The news came not from management, but from Anna, who handed him a check and a sealed envelope with nothing but a clipped apology. "Too much heat," they said. Paul just shrugged, more resigned than angry. "I've been thrown out of better places," he grumbled. But Ben saw the sadness in the older man's eyes, the way he lingered by the doors, taking one last look at the only steady job he'd had in years. Maria, meanwhile, was granted legal protection by a local nonprofit and the city's new prosecutor, who'd made a point of thanking her publicly. She stayed in a borrowed apartment above a bakery, restless and scared but free for the first time in months. She called her mother back home every night, voice trembling as she tried to describe what had happened. "They said I was brave, Mama, but I was so scared." On the days she didn't want to leave bed, she remembered Atlas's head in her lap, Ben's promise that things could be different, and she forced herself out into the world. The trauma lingered for all of them. Ben, suspended and adrift, spent his days sorting through the flood of letters and emails that poured in. Guests he'd protected, staff he'd supported, even strangers from other cities who'd seen his name on the news. Some letters thanked him, some accused him of overstepping. Most just wanted to know if they'd ever be safe in a place like Grand Lake again. He kept every note, reading them when sleep refused to come. Atlas, ever the hero, took time to heal. The cut from the broken bottle left a jagged scar along his side, but the old dog refused to rest. He followed Ben from room to room in their small apartment, his eyes never leaving the door, ears flicking at every unexpected sound. Ben took comfort in Atlas's loyalty, a reminder that even when the world spun out of control, some bonds held strong. Paul, out of work and at loose ends, received a call from one of Ben's old friends, Frank, who ran a private security company in the city. "I saw you on TV," Frank said, voice gruff but warm. "You've got guts. I could use a man like you if you're interested." Paul hesitated at first, not wanting pity, but the promise of a fresh start was too good to pass up. His limp didn't matter to Frank. What mattered was courage and honesty, and Paul had plenty of both. He started the following week, already respected for his quick thinking and calm in a crisis. Maria found her own purpose, too. She began volunteering with a nonprofit dedicated to supporting immigrant workers, translating documents, teaching English, listening to stories from men and women too afraid to speak up before. She used her own experience as a shield and a beacon. "You can survive this," she'd tell them. "People will help if you let them." For the first time since arriving in America, Maria felt like she belonged, like her suffering had meant something, like she could help others find their way out of the darkness. The hotel's closure rippled through the city, putting hundreds of workers out of a job, drawing protests and news cameras. But something else started to happen too. People started talking. Old secrets crept into the light. Whistleblowers from other hotels came forward. Politicians who'd taken hush money found themselves under scrutiny. Change was slow, uneven, and sometimes brutal, but it was happening. The Grand Lake Hotel was no longer just a place of luxury and silence. It had become a symbol, a warning, and, if Ben let himself hope, a promise. Despite the uncertainty, Ben clung to the small victories. He met Maria for coffee sometimes, talking quietly in a back booth where they could watch the door and keep each other company. He visited Paul at his new job, listening to the older man complain about paperwork but secretly thriving in his new role. And every day, he walked Atlas in the park, letting the old dog sniff at the grass and greet the neighborhood children who recognized him from the news. One afternoon, Ben came home to find a stack of envelopes slipped under his door. Letters from guests, former staff, and even the city's mayor. Some were just thanks. Some were invitations to speak or help with other investigations. The one that stood out was a simple card. "You did what we couldn't. You made them see us." It was unsigned. For all the loss and fear, Ben felt a new sense of purpose growing. He didn't know if he'd ever work at the Grand Lake again, but he knew that what they'd done mattered. The hotel was closed, but the walls could never hold those secrets again. Atlas, sensing Ben's mood, rested his head on Ben's knee and closed his eyes. The fight had cost them all dearly, but it had given them something too. A kind of family, forged in fire and fear, but stronger for it. In the stillness of the quiet apartment, Ben realized they had won more than just a battle. They had changed a small part of the world. And sometimes that was enough. The city's spotlight had shifted from the Grand Lake Hotel itself to something larger. The question of how a place so polished, so respected, could let secrets fester behind closed doors for so long. In the weeks after the story broke, Ben found himself swept into a new role. No longer just a night manager, but a reluctant spokesperson for something bigger. He was invited to a televised town hall where activists, politicians, hotel workers, and ordinary citizens gathered to talk about corruption, whistleblowing, and what it meant to truly see the invisible people in their midst. Under the glare of studio lights, Ben sat on a high stool beside Maria and Paul, with Atlas lying at their feet. His hands shook as he gripped the microphone, scanning the crowd. He saw faces he recognized. Anna from the front desk, Frank from the security company, even a few old guests who'd always tipped well but never noticed the janitors cleaning up behind them. For a moment, Ben wished he could be anywhere else, back at his old desk, just another nobody on the night shift. But the weight of everything that had happened pressed him forward. The moderator turned to Ben. "You had a choice. You could have walked away. Why did you get involved?" Ben thought of all the nights he'd ignored his own gut, of every voice he'd chosen not to hear. He cleared his throat, voice rough but honest. Because it's easy to tell yourself it's not your problem, that someone else will do something. But the truth is, it's never just one secret, never just one bad thing hidden behind a door. It's a chain, and if you break even one link, maybe you save a life, maybe you change something. Maria nodded, her eyes bright with tears. "I was afraid every day." I thought no one would ever listen. But Ben and Atlas and Paul, they cared when no one else did. I want people to know. It's not that we aren't brave. It's that sometimes being brave is just surviving. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right, even when you're terrified. The audience listened, silent and intent, as Paul spoke next. When you spend your life cleaning up after other people, you learn a lot. You learn who really runs things, and it's not always the ones in charge. Sometimes, it's just the people who pay attention, who see what others want to ignore. He shrugged, looking at Maria and Ben. Some debts you pay forward, not back. Somebody helped me once. Now it was my turn. A teacher in the audience asked Maria, "How do you build trust again after so much fear?" Maria smiled, gentle but firm. One day at a time. You help someone else and they help you. You build a new family, even if it's not the one you started with. You stop letting shame and fear tell your story. Ben listened as others shared their own confessions. Hotel workers who'd stayed silent for fear of losing their jobs. A security guard who'd left quietly after refusing to cover up a guest's abuse. A waitress who'd always tipped off staff about suspicious guests but never dared speak out loud. The studio, for all its artificial lights, felt realer than anything Ben had ever experienced in uniform. At the end of the forum, the moderator asked Ben to sum up what he'd learned. He paused, thinking of Atlas, of Maria's bravery, of Paul's quiet support. Institutions, hotels, companies, even police departments, they protect themselves first. They forget about the vulnerable. It's always the ordinary people, the janitors, the night managers, the dogs, who notice what others miss. It's their choices that really change things. Loyalty isn't just about standing with someone when it's easy, but when it costs you. Community is about seeing the people no one else wants to see, and daring to act when you could just walk away. Applause filled the studio. Ben felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. The past could never be erased. He knew that. The guests who'd disappeared, the voices that had gone unheard, those losses still haunted him. But the chain of silence had been broken. That was something. Afterward, he sat with Maria, Paul, and Atlas in the green room, sharing tired laughter and lukewarm coffee. Maria told him about her new job helping other immigrant workers find safe housing and legal advice. "I never thought I could be this person," she said, smiling shyly. "You are this person," Ben told her. "You always were." Paul, more at ease than Ben had ever seen him, described his new job with Frank's security company. "Frank says I'm a good liar," he joked, "but I told him I only ever lie for the right reasons." Atlas, stretched out on the floor, rolled over for a belly rub, tongue lolling happily. For all his scars, he seemed content. Proof that even the most wounded could heal with enough care and time. Letters and messages continued to pour in. Some came from other hotel workers, desperate for someone to listen. Others came from families of missing women, thanking Ben, Maria, and Paul for giving them hope, if not closure. The hardest ones came from people Ben couldn't help, reminders that change is slow and that no one wins every battle. One night, as Ben sat on his apartment stoop with Atlas, he thought about what came next. The city was still full of secrets, and not every door had been opened. But maybe that was the lesson. Real change comes from listening, from loyalty, from a single person daring to care, even when the system says to look away. He scratched Atlas behind the ears and looked up at the city lights, a quiet promise in his heart. I won't be silent again, not when it matters. Somewhere, behind some closed door, someone else was waiting for help. And if he could give it, if he could notice the unnoticed, he would. That was how you changed the world, one broken link at a time. Months slipped by, and with them the city's memory of the scandal faded, at least on the surface. But inside the Grand Lake Hotel, nothing would ever be the same. After the investigation ended, the doors finally reopened, this time under new ownership and with promises written into every contract and plastered on every wall. There were new faces at the desk, new rules for staff safety, and a different kind of energy in the lobby. For once, the voices of the cleaners, the maintenance crews, and the night staff echoed alongside the laughter of guests. Ben stood just outside the entrance on reopening day, a fresh suit on his back, Atlas at his side, his badge now reading Consultant, Security and Safety. A gold and blue banner flapped above the doors. Welcome back to a better Grand Lake. In the lobby, a photo wall had been installed, lined with images of everyday heroes. There was Ben, looking older than he felt. There was Maria, smiling shyly, and Paul, grinning in his work shirt. And in the middle, a blown-up shot of Atlas, tail mid-wag, tongue lolling, eyes shining with the hope only a good dog could offer. It was more than a public relations move. The new leadership had hired Ben to develop a staff protection program, one that actually listened to the most vulnerable, the invisible workers who made the place run. He didn't work alone. Paul, brought on as his deputy, managed security with a firm hand but a fair heart, giving jobs to others who'd been chewed up and spit out by the system. And Maria, now fluent and confident, split her time between running training for immigrant workers and volunteering with a citywide nonprofit for labor rights. The work was hard. They had to push against old habits, retrain managers, and convince guests that this was a hotel where every voice mattered, not just those who paid the highest bill. Ben found himself called into meetings with city inspectors and even TV reporters. Some days he missed the quiet of his old night rounds, just him, Atlas, and the hum of the hotel in the dark. But he couldn't deny how much the work mattered. Atlas, now retired from guard duty, was more than a mascot. Twice a week he visited the senior center nearby as a therapy dog, brightening the days of residents who looked forward to his big, gentle presence. Ben loved watching the old shepherd work his magic, how even the most withdrawn folks would light up, talking to Atlas as if he understood every word. In truth, Ben thought, maybe Atlas did. One autumn afternoon, a small girl with anxious eyes and a nervous grip on her mother's hand stood in the lobby, too afraid to go into the bustling grand reopening party. Ben knelt beside her, introducing her to Atlas, whose soft brown eyes and slow tail wag melted her fear. The girl smiled, reaching out to pet him. "He's not scary," she whispered. Ben grinned. "He's the bravest friend I know." As Atlas gently leaned into her, Ben saw the change. How one quiet act of kindness could open doors, even to the most frightened heart. The hotel's reputation began to mend, little by little, as stories of staff protection and fairness replaced rumors of cover-ups and fear. Employees from all backgrounds stopped Ben in the halls to thank him, or to share a problem they might once have hidden. The culture was shifting. People noticed the unnoticed. They cared, and it showed. Maria's story inspired more than one guest to donate to her nonprofit, and she soon found herself mentoring new arrivals, immigrants like herself, scared and unsure, just looking for a foothold. "You are stronger than you know," she'd tell them, passing on the lesson Ben, Paul, and Atlas had taught her. Don't let fear write your story. Paul became a favorite among the new hires. "If you see something wrong, tell me," he'd say, sometimes with a wink. "We don't hide things here." And when asked why he'd stuck his neck out for a maid and a dog, he'd just shrug. "Some debts you pay forward." That's how you build a place worth working for. As for Ben, the changes weren't just professional. He spoke at other hotels, trained night managers, and even gave a few talks at community colleges about whistleblowing, loyalty, and noticing the invisible. But the moments he treasured most were quiet. Walking Atlas through the city at sunrise, sharing coffee with Maria and Paul, or watching staff members greet each other by name in the lobby. There were setbacks, of course. Not every guest was kind. Not every boss was as brave as the ones who'd taken over Grand Lake. But the story of the hotel's turnaround began to ripple outward, encouraging other businesses, even some in city government, to rethink how they treated their own invisible armies. On the first anniversary of the hotel's reopening, they held a small ceremony. The mayor showed up, along with local news, to unveil a plaque. In honor of everyday courage, for those who listened, spoke up, and never gave up. Ben felt a lump in his throat as Atlas sat at his side, tongue out, tail wagging for the cameras. That evening, as the crowds drifted home and the lobby quieted, Ben watched Atlas greet an elderly guest who'd just arrived, nervous and alone. The dog pressed his head gently into her hand, and she smiled, relaxing for the first time since she stepped through the door. Ben realized then that courage didn't just shatter walls, it built bridges too. As he looked at the hotel, glowing softly in the night, Ben understood. Real change is slow, sometimes painfully so. It happens one act at a time, one person at a time. But once the silence is broken, once even the quietest voice is heard, the walls that seemed so strong begin to crumble. The ripples of courage spread further than anyone can predict. The Grand Lake Hotel was proof that even in a world of closed doors, being willing to open just one, being willing to care, could change everything for someone. And maybe, just maybe, for you too.